If I was you, I'd just pay the ticket. There's no way to get out of it. There's no such thing as small town justice. Okay, just pay the ticket. All right. You know, it reminds me of a story. There was this young attorney named Jeff Dean, right out of law school, on fire for the law. Kind of shy, kind of quiet, but really wanted to make a difference. He moved to this little small town called 8 Mile, population around 3,000. Set up shop there, and like most young lawyers, he went down to the courthouse and signed up to start taking public defense cases. You know what that is? That's when a person goes to court and they can't afford an attorney, and then the court will assign an attorney for them. He was one of those guys. So all of his clients were very poor, come from a very bad background, and there was no justice for them. Early on, Jeff learned that it wasn't about justice. What it was about was who you know, how much money you got, who you're kin to, those types of things. Sad situation, but the truth is, that's the way justice is done in most towns in America. This particular town had a DA that had been in office for over 30 years. His name was Michael Ward. Very, very corrupt DA. But everything in that town, everything, was done his way. Whatever he said, that's how it went. And the judge, the only judge on the bench, Joseph Wilson, he was an old, quiet gentleman, and he just sat on the bench and went through the motions. It was very, very apparent that Michael Ward ran that town. Well, one day Jeff was at his office and this young man came by. He had just got back from the military and he had been injured. Matter of fact, he looked like he was high all the time. He had gotten injured right here. It wasn't apparent that he had an injury, but he couldn't open his eyes, so you either thought he was high or that he was slow, had a learning disability, when in fact, it was just from an injury. Jeff took to Jimmy real quick. They became friends. Jeff gave Jimmy a place to live out back, put him to work cleaning and cutting the lawn out front of the office. Matter of fact, helped him get some jobs cutting the other offices in the neighborhood. So Jimmy was making out pretty good. But I tell you, let me tell you when the story took a bad turn. One day while Jeff was in his office, the mayor's daughter, Brandy, came by. Brandy was gorgeous, but she was promiscuous. She was a party girl. She liked to go out, have a good time, drink, get high. Couldn't stay out of trouble. The only way she could stay out of trouble was the DA was Mike Ward, and that was the best friend of the mayor. So she knew she could get away with anything she wanted to get away with. Well, one day while she came into the office, Jimmy saw her, and he was mesmerized by her. Oh, he couldn't take his eyes off of her. It was almost eerie. It was almost like he was stalking her. Well, that would come back to haunt him. About 3 weeks go by, and they found Brandy murdered. Oh, the whole town was in an uproar. The mayor was just devastated. He had called his old buddy Mike in the DA's office. They had every investigator and every police officer in the town looking to try to solve who did this. Well, wasn't long, justice came knocking. They went and kicked in the back door. They took Jimmy, took him to jail. Well, when Jeff got back to his office, he had a note that they had taken Jimmy to jail. So Jeff goes down to try to make bond for him. He was going to represent him. He found out right away they wouldn't let him have bond. They wouldn't even have a bond hearing. He was going to stay in jail for as long as it took to get their kind of justice. Jeff filed motion after motion. He fought tooth and nail, but all they would do, they'd have these little backroom conferences in the judge's chambers where they would tell him, just take a plea deal. Just take a plea deal. We know he did it. You know he did it. Jeff was convinced that Jimmy didn't do anything. Jeff had his suspicions. He really did. He thought it was the DA's son, Cliff. Cliff was one of those kids that felt entitled. He was spoiled. He got anything he wanted. He could do no wrong. 35 miles an hour on the street, he'd drive 70 and nobody would pull him over. Nobody would give him a ticket. They knew he was a bad kid, but everybody turned a blind eye to it. Jeff didn't. Jeff had his suspicions. One day Jeff brought it up in open court that there was really no evidence that pointed to Jimmy, that this was a travesty of justice, and that if the court did not give him bail, he was going to call in the federal police. He was going to call in the news media and make a big scene out of it. Immediately, the judge slammed the gavel down and held Jeff in contempt of court, had him locked up. Well, they could only hold him for 24 hours. Well, while they were holding him, somebody burnt down his house. That sent a clear message. Hey, dude, you're going to do our things. You're going to do things our way, or you won't do them at all. Well, Jeff, true to his word, called in the federal police, called in the media, and on broadcast TV, he pleaded with the governor, send a special prosecutor, send a special judge down here to try this case, because we need some justice here in this town. Well, sure enough, wasn't long, maybe 24 hours, and a new judge showed up. The new judge was Federal Judge Eddie Rines. Nice looking young man, been on the bench about 3 years. You could tell that he was all about justice. Just when we thought justice was going to happen and everything was starting to flow in that direction, they found Jeff Dean dead. They said it was an apparent gunshot wound, but boy, I sure have doubts about it. It really makes me doubt it when I'm driving out on Route 4 by Hershey Lake and I see old federal Judge Ryan sitting out in a boat with his brother-in-law, D.A. Mike Ward.